So hey, so today in this video we will be discussing about context API. So what is context API actually? So it's basically alternate to prop drilling, right? So prop drilling is really hectic, as you know. For example, let me show you, get into slides, and let's see what is the real issue in the prop drilling. So for example, if you are making any app, so if you are making any I mean the prop tree, you can see there that we have to define the state or the function in the top level, and then we have to pass the props, right. So for example, if there is a button and here and there is a card container here, so as soon as I click on the card, this should increase from 1 to 2, right. So we have to define a state and a function here, and all the way we have to pass the props, the function and the state to the button, and as soon as we get invoke this, our state gets updated, and we have to again pass the props through here to here, and then reflect the state in the UI, right. So this in the small app, it is good. I mean, we can do it, but if the app is really large or the project is really large, then you have to use something called context API. So what context API is, it basically solves the problem of prop drilling. So in the prop drilling, for example, there are another three mm, components. We don't have to pass props in the child components, right? So what is actually, so let's see what is the main issue. So in the prop drilling, you can see in the prop drilling, you can see that this is the issue, that we have to pass the props to the child component, and then again the child component, again the child component, right. So what context API solves is just maintain a global state, a global box, which you can see the global box, and just use the function or any state or anything you want, any styles or you want, and just use that in your any child you want. I mean, just define a state here, just define a global box here, and just use those values, for example function or state, in their child components by using something called use state. We will get, I mean, use context. Okay, so we will get into it later in the video. So these are, you can see the children's, these are the children's, right. So it is just like a laser. So without passing the props, we are basically I mean, accessing the values and the functions here, right. So yeah, so you can see without context, this is how without context it looks like. I mean, it is really a complicated thing, right. So you have to pass the ball across from here to here. Sometimes if it's a big project, you will only get confused, right. So that's why to solve that issue, React has came up with the context API. So what context API tells us, just maintain a global state or a box and just pass the values there. For example, values can be anything called maybe function, maybe state, or maybe anything you want in the state, and you can use wherever you want in the child component or anything. So yeah, there's the provider. Okay, so what use context, I mean the context API provides us dot provider and a dot consumer. So to make a box, for example, if it's a box, then you have to provide it, right. I mean, for example, there is a parent and there is a children. So I mean, the parent has to provide maybe the financial expenses or anything, maybe the help or anything throughout the life, and the child will consume, right, by the help of dot consumer. So that's what I mean. The dot consumer is also known as a use context. I mean, there is a book called use context. So you can use dot consumer as well as use context as well. So let's get into the example we have. Okay, yeah. So let's get into the example. So first of all, let me show you something. Yeah. So this is, you can say the context. So this is just like a box, and if we want to access anything that is inside the app, we have to wrap around the app. I mean, wrap the app inside the provider. I mean the context, right? That in that way we will be able to access the app, isn't it? Right. So there's the context, and this has the dot provider and dot consumer inside it. It has the dot consumer, I mean the dot consumer and dot provider inside it. And in the app, and any component, for example, this is a component, this is a component, this is a component. So we can use context here, and just connect I mean maintain a connection between the app context and the app component, right? So let's get into the example. Let's see what it is. So there's a simple app. You can see the simple app. Yeah. Okay. So in the app.js, what I have done is just a container and a button. So as soon as I click on this, there's the theme. I mean, the theme gets changes, right? So container and a button, and in the context, you can see, I have just defined a function. I have defined a style, and I have defined a state. So what I have done, so what context, anything you want to use, you have to create something, right? I mean, you have to create first. So what React provides us, first of all, create the context with the help of create context. It is the React, from the React only. So you have to create the context and just give a variable name or anything you want, and it should be unique, because there might be, in this case we have one context, but there might be 50 of context, right? So you have to differentiate those contexts with one another, right? So you have to create the context and just write a function. We have separated the component, otherwise we have to write the app, I mean inside the app.js. So I have basically made another component which I will wrap around to the in the I I want to wrap the app.js inside the context provider, right? So this context has the dot provider and dot consumer. So let's console the context as well, so you'll get some idea. Yeah, yeah. So in the context, as you can see, there is a provider and there is a consumer, right? So you can use dot provider and just pass the values inside. So these values can be anything. And context API is not for state management. We still have to use state to manage our state. So there is nothing that context API. I mean, if someone is telling you that context API is the one who is maintaining the state, then it's not. It's just a box. There is nothing. I mean, you can just put something in the box, but there is nothing like a machine inside the box. Okay. So you still have to use state on that. Okay. So I have just passed the function style and the boolean, because boolean is the state. And what I have done is just dot provider. I have used dot provider, and what is the children? So what I am doing, so whatever inside the context, I am just treating it like a children. So now in this case, my children is app.js. Let us see what is this actually. Index.js, this is the context provider. It is just a component. And inside that, whatever it is, just treat that like a children. Okay. So I have just used the children, and I have to pass the children as well. So children, and whatever inside the the context provider, just make it, I mean, basically what it is saying, that whatever inside the children, it should be able to access my values. Okay. So in the button, I have just de-extracted the function and just use that on click inside the function. Okay. So what is my function actually? So as you can see, there's the function, and whatever the state, it will just make it, I mean, reverse. Okay. So what is the previous state? It is false, then it will just make it true. Okay. It is a not operator. Okay. So I've just extracted, I mean, destructured the function from the context. So what React provides is just you can use context as well as context dot consumer, as you can see, dot consumer, right? So we have used the dot provider. We have to provide the context to our whole application, and the application should be able to access everything inside the context by the help of dot consumer. Okay. So use context is this, and this use context should know which context I want to. I mean, there should be, you have a particular name, right? You have a unique name that, yeah, by the, so if someone is calling that, yeah, I need, for example, Shubham, so then Shubham is one only, right? So there is no Shubham another, I mean, other than that. So you have to use that context. And what is this context coming from? There's this thing. it can be context one, it can be context two, whatever the name you want. You can, it is just a variable name. So you can use that and just make a, so what I am in this step, what I'm basically doing, I'm just establishing a connection between the app.js and the context, right? So by that, what I can do is I can just easily this app.js, whatever inside the app.js or anything app.js will be able to access all the values that is inside my context. Okay. So there's my, I am just destructuring the function because in this component, I just need the function only. I don't need the Boolean or anything. So I'm just passing the on. Okay. In the container, what I'm doing is I'm just extracting Boolean and the style because I need the style. They're basically the JavaScript. I mean, just doing the if this style, if Boolean is true, then dark, or else it will be light. So this just a ternary operator. Okay. So yeah, this the thing. So how can we use the context API? So it can be used in theming as well. So in some apps you must have seen that there is a dark theme, there is a, I mean, the light theme, isn't it? So in the Geeks for Geeks or maybe Google Chrome, there is a dark theme. Or as soon as you click that, so all the components gets black, isn't it? So whatever the components there are, all the components gets that theme right away, isn't it? So how do you think that can be managed? Is it using a prop? No, right? So it will be definitely a use context. I mean the context API. So you can use the authentication as well as routing. I will make a separate video on the routing as well. So authentication, how can you manage the authentication and the routing? I will show you. Okay. So yeah, that's it in this example. So let's see how can we manage the authentication as well. So this is just a simple example. This is the private route I have made. So private route, let's see the first of all the auth context. Okay, this is just a, I mean the file name. So similarly I have just used the the auth, I mean gave the variable name as auth context, and I have just created the context for first of all. And what I have done is just to use the use state and just define the state. So whatever, and I'm just passing this thing, I mean the function, and I'm just passing those things as a values. So whatever inside my auth context, that let's see what, so there's my auth context, isn't it? So whatever inside the auth context, just you can just ignore the browser router for now. So the app.js is inside it, right? I mean the auth context provider. So what it is saying that whatever inside me should be able to access my values. So app.js is the value, and whatever it is app.js, there is a protnaf and the routes for, you can just ignore these things. So whatever inside the app or the app itself, you can do use context here and here as well. Okay. So in the private route, what I am doing, I am just extracting the isauth, that is the Boolean value, and what I am doing, the defining the unique ID, and just extracting that value. And if it's, for example, if it's false, then just simply navigate to home page. It is just a routing concept. I will ignore this for now. Okay. So there's the children, and just if it's not, then just return the children. Okay. So yeah, I think you must have got the basic idea about the context API. So I will make a separate video on the routing as well. So yeah, till then, thanks a lot for sticking to the video.